She walked into the ballroom in a simple blue dress. Not designer, not tailored. Just something she picked off the rack with quiet pride. Her hair was done up neatly, her makeup soft, and in her eyes, a kind of hope you don't see often anymore. But almost as soon as she stepped onto the glossy floor, the stares started. Not the curious kind, the judgmental kind. Whispers moved quicker than the music, slicing through the elegance like cold wind. And within minutes, someone, no one really knows who, asked her to leave. Politely, of course. Always politely, when it's about power and pride. They said, it wasn't personal, but it was clear. She didn't belong there. Not to them. What they didn't know, what no one in that glittering room could have guessed, was who she really was. Not a socialite, not an heiress. Just a woman who had once been a waitress, who had struggled to pay rent, and who had found love in the most unexpected place, with a man the world calls a billionaire, but to her is just him. They met long before the world knew his name, before the press called him a genius, and before he could afford private jets and sky-high buildings. He loved her for who she was, not what she wore. When he heard what happened that night, something in him shifted. Not out of anger, but out of love. The kind of love that doesn't shout, but acts. Quietly. Boldly. And the next morning, the very people who turned her away woke up to a shocking headline. The building, the ballroom, the tower it sat in, every brick, had a new owner. And he had only one condition. The world watched as luxury and pride clashed with something far more powerful: dignity. Because sometimes the richest stories don't come from revenge. They come from a simple gesture that says, "You were wrong about her." But that's only where it begins. What happened next changed more than just a building. It shifted the way high society saw her, and how she saw herself. And as rumors began to swirl about secret deals, hidden motives, and a message, whispered through money, one question remained. Did he do it for her? Or for something else entirely? Her name is Elena. She grew up in a quiet town, raised by her grandmother after her parents passed away in a car accident when she was just 8. Life didn't hand her anything easily. She worked double shifts, through college, cleaned houses on weekends, and saved every spare dollar to chase a dream she never even had time to define. What mattered to her wasn't the spotlight, it was security, peace, and the feeling of being enough in a world that often made her feel invisible. She met Adrian on one of her lowest days, when she was rushing between jobs and spilled coffee on his expensive coat. He didn't get angry. He smiled, asked if she was okay. That moment, simple as it was, became the start of something she never expected. She didn't know then that Adrian Locke was one of the youngest tech billionaires in the country, or that his face often appeared in finance magazines and industry news. He never led with that, and she never cared. They dated quietly, away from flashing cameras and judgmental eyes. To him, Elena was refreshing, real in a world full of polished lies. He once said her honesty made him feel human again. To her, Adrian wasn't just wealthy. He was kind, thoughtful, and unlike anyone she'd ever known. But the world around them didn't make it easy. Some whispered that she was after his money. Others said she was too plain, too simple, not fit for his lifestyle. She ignored it for the most part, until the ballroom incident. That night, she hadn't wanted to go. She didn't feel ready for that kind of crowd. But Adrian encouraged her. "You belong anywhere I do," he told her. And for a moment, she believed him, until reality hit her like a slap, dressed in diamonds and cold smiles. Being turned away wasn't just humiliating. It confirmed every fear she'd pushed down for months. When Adrian bought the building, it sent shockwaves through high society. But Elena wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her was grateful, but another part, deep down, felt something heavier. Was this really about love or about power? Was he protecting her or proving something to them? As she stood in the center of the now empty ballroom days later, everything was quiet, but inside her, questions screamed louder than ever. The building wasn't just any building. It was a symbol. One of the oldest and most exclusive properties in the city. A place where the elite gathered, where deals were made over champagne, and where names were everything. Adrian's sudden purchase wasn't seen as a romantic gesture by everyone. In fact, within certain circles, it was viewed as a statement, a challenge. And that's when things started to shift, not just between Elena and the world, but between Elena and Adrian. The media picked up the story almost overnight. Headlines called it the Ballroom buyout and speculated about the real reason behind it. Some said Adrian was trying to destroy the old money gatekeepers who'd always shut him out for being self-made. Others painted it as a power move to rewrite the rules of high society. Few saw it as what it really was to Elena, deeply personal, painfully complicated. And then there was Sophia Delane, an old friend of Adrian's, socialite, investor, former flame. She'd always been part of Adrian's past, but never part of Elena's present, until now. Sophia showed up one afternoon, unannounced, saying she was concerned. She spoke in soft tones, but her words cut sharp. She suggested that Elena might be a distraction, that Adrian's judgment was slipping. That maybe, just maybe, all of this, buying a building to make a point, wasn't about love at all, but pride. Elena didn't respond. She didn't trust herself to. But after Sophia left, she looked at Adrian differently. Not with anger, but with confusion. She wanted to believe that their story was built on something real. But now she wasn't sure who was really pulling the strings. Was she part of a love story or a public spectacle? Meanwhile, inside the building itself, changes were happening fast. Staff were replaced. Event schedules were cleared. Rumors spread that Adrian was planning to turn the ballroom into a community arts space, open to anyone, regardless of wealth or status. Some saw it as noble, others saw it as reckless. And all the while, Elena began to feel more like a symbol than a person. People whispered her name in interviews. She was being written into articles, analyzed in podcasts, used as an example in debates about class and power. But no one asked how she felt, and the truth was, she wasn't sure anymore. Elena began avoiding the ballroom. What once felt like a wound slowly turned into a weight she couldn't shake. Every time she thought about stepping back inside, she remembered the way those eyes looked at her that night like she didn't belong. Now, even though the space technically belonged to Adrian, it didn't feel like it belonged to her. It didn't feel like home. And somehow, Adrian didn't either. Their conversations had shifted. He was busy, more distracted than usual, constantly, in meetings with architects, lawyers, and PR people. He spoke in terms like brand positioning and legacy, and every time he said the word inclusion, Elena winced. She knew he meant well, but something about it felt staged, as if she had become part of a bigger message, one she didn't write. Things came to a head one night over dinner. Adrian had just come back from a board meeting and was excitedly telling her about the gala he was planning, a reopening of the ballroom, open to all backgrounds, with Elena as the guest of honor. The idea was supposed to be empowering, but to her it felt like a trap. She stayed quiet until he asked her, "Isn't this what you wanted?" And for the first time she said, "I don't know anymore." That silence between them said more than anything. He looked confused, hurt, but underneath it all, maybe a little scared. Because for all the money and power he had, he couldn't control this. He couldn't fix what was breaking between them with a purchase or a headline. And Elena wasn't sure if he even saw her anymore, or just the story she represented. Behind the scenes, pressure was mounting. Donors who once supported Adrian's foundation were pulling away, citing concerns over his recent decisions. Longtime allies were questioning his direction, and a leaked email suggested that Sophia and others were planning to buy back parts of the building through a quiet corporate deal. If true, it could unravel everything Adrian had built, personally and publicly. Meanwhile, Elena received a letter, handwritten, no name, just a message. You were never meant to be part of our world, and no matter what he buys, it won't change that. She didn't show Adrian, not yet. Because now, everything was reaching a breaking point. A few days after the letter arrived, Elena received an unexpected call from a blocked number. She almost didn't answer, but something, curiosity, instinct, maybe both, made her press accept. A man's voice, calm and unfamiliar, told her to check the city registrar's office. There's something you need to see, he said. About the ballroom. About who really owns it now. Before she could ask anything, the line went dead. That same afternoon, Elena went downtown alone, heart pounding as she waited at the clerk's desk. She asked for records on the building. The woman behind the counter typed for a moment, then raised her eyebrows. This was just updated 2 days ago, she said, sliding a file across the counter. Elena's hands shook slightly as she opened the folder. What she saw wasn't just confusing, it was shocking. Adrian's name was no longer listed as the sole owner. A silent partnership had been added, 50% control. Anonymous through a shell company, but she recognized the holding name. She'd heard it mentioned during one of Adrian's phone calls. It was Sophia's. The room tilted slightly as Elena sat down. Her mind raced. This wasn't just a business twist, it was betrayal. If Sophia had maneuvered her way into the ownership behind Adrian's back, or worse, with his permission, then everything Elena believed about this gesture of love was crumbling. She returned home late, still, processing what she'd learned, and found Adrian waiting for her. He'd been pacing. He held out another letter, this one printed, not handwritten. A formal notice from city authorities. Due to zoning restrictions and a pending legal review, the gala and renovations had been paused. Someone had filed a claim, contesting the new use of the ballroom. I think it's sabotage, he told her. Someone's trying to block the reopening. I just don't know who yet. Elena didn't say anything. She couldn't. Not yet. Not with her trust fractured and her emotions barely holding. Because if Adrian did know about the ownership change and hadn't told her, it meant he wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was hiding something. And if he didn't known, then he was being outplayed by someone far closer than he realized. Either way, the ballroom wasn't just a building anymore. It had become a battleground. And Elena was caught in the middle of a war she never wanted to fight. Elena finally confronted Adrian the next morning. She stood in the sunlit kitchen, the city skyline behind them, the file from the registrar's office open on the counter. Tell me the truth, she said quietly. Did you give Sophia part of the building? Adrian's face shifted from confusion to shock as he read the documents. No, he said, his voice flat. I didn't. I wouldn't. But she wasn't sure what to believe until she saw the anger in his eyes. Not at her, but at what had been done behind his back. He picked up his phone, dialing a number without hesitation. Get legal on the line. Now. I want to know who signed off on this. In the hours that followed, the truth unraveled fast. One of Adrian's senior advisors, long trusted and deeply connected to Sophia, had authorized the silent partnership under a false directive. The intent was clear. Take partial control, halt the project, and damage Adrian's public credibility, using Elena's presence as the trigger point. The letter Elena received? A scare tactic meant to drive a wedge between them. But Adrian wasn't going down quietly. He called a press conference that same evening, standing with Elena at his side in front of the now empty ballroom. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but he stayed calm. He didn't name names, but he told the truth about the incident that sparked everything, about his intention to create a space where no one would be turned away, and about the forces trying to silence that change. Then, to everyone's surprise, he made one final announcement. He was donating the building. Not to a museum or an investor, but to a non-profit run by local artists and community leaders, with Elena as its founding chair. "This space was never meant to belong to me," he said. "It belongs to the people who never felt welcome in places like this." The crowd erupted. Some praised him, some doubted him. But Elena just stood there, stunned, trying to make sense of it all. Later that night, when they were alone, Adrian handed her another envelope. No threats this time, just a document. Her name on the deed, full ownership, signed over quietly, days ago, before he even knew about Sophia's betrayal. And that's when she realized the ballroom wasn't the twist. She was. The next morning, the ballroom felt different. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows, lighting up the polished floors that once echoed with exclusion. Now, the space was quiet, but full of possibility. Elena stood at the center of it, holding the deed in her hands, trying to understand how far things had come. She wasn't the woman who had been asked to leave that night. She wasn't the one who felt small anymore. This time, she was the one holding the keys. Adrian stood by the doorway, giving her space. They had talked late into the night, about trust, about the pain between them, about how power could lift people or break them. They agreed to slow down, to stop trying to prove anything to the world and start focusing on what felt right to them. The drama, the deals, the headlines, they all meant less now. What mattered was what they built together, and what they chose to let go of. Sophia's stake had been quietly withdrawn once Adrian exposed the manipulation. She released a vague statement to the media about misunderstandings in business, and stepped back from public attention. The advisor responsible was removed from Adrian's company, and the board had begun to rebuild trust. But Elena didn't care much for that part. What mattered to her was the silence after the noise, the calm that followed the storm. Over the next few months, the ballroom transformed. The walls, once lined with portraits of the elite, were now decorated with local art. Children danced. Where ball gowns once twirled, poetry nights replaced silent auctions, and people who never thought they'd be welcome in such a space finally had a place to belong. Elena didn't want fame or recognition, but word got out anyway. People started calling her the woman who changed the ballroom, and her story quietly inspired others to question the invisible lines drawn by class, image, and wealth. She didn't claim to be a hero. She just stood her ground. In the end, the story wasn't really about money. It was about dignity, about finding power in simplicity, and love. Not the kind that shouts from rooftops, but the kind that listens, that changes, and that knows when to let go. The ballroom didn't make her belong. She made the ballroom belong to everyone. And that was the real legacy.